Morning, everyone. I am Shelly Ann Dunkley, and I will be your moderator today. Today, we will be talking about waste management strategies in the Caribbean. I believe this is actually a very, very topical issue based on the fact that there is a lot for us to address. It is not a regional issue only. We are not outside of the scope of what is happening across the globe. So join us in this conversation as we talk about what strategies we can implement, whether in our islands or across the region. I do believe this is going to be quite an exciting conversation. So I look forward to our guests who will impart a lot of knowledge and information sharing as well. You know, can we put together something for a regional solution to our issues? So joining us today, we are going to be speaking to three experts in their field. We have Sean Coffey Young. She is the CEO and principal consultant from Sahel Environmental Services Limited, which is based in Trinidad. Sean, please join us. We also have Dr. Lorna Innes, who is coordinator of UN Environment Program, Cartagena Convention Secretariat. Dr. Innes, please join us. And we have Shanta King, who is project director of the Replast OECS pilot plastic recycling project, which is actually based in St. Lucia. Shanta, please join us. Hello, ladies. You can all turn your mics on.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you for joining us. Before we jump in, I do have some housekeeping that I need to take care of. I would like to thank our sponsors, Scotiabank, Coca-Cola, Junk Cayman, and Cayman Business Solutions. Thank you to them for allowing us to come together in this platform and having these types of conversations. So once again, thanks to our sponsors. Like I'd mentioned, today we'll be addressing our waste management and pollution issues across the region. For this show, we want to come up with some solutions. We want to hear what is happening in the different islands and what can we do together, or is there something that we can do, you know, together, or is it each individual island has their own remit and something that they're actually doing there. I do want to make note of one thing. According to a United Nations Environment Program article, about 70 to 85% of marine litter in the Caribbean comes from the land. You know, 70 to 85% of the litter that we see in our ocean or in our Caribbean Sea is actually from land. And most of that is plastic. So let us jump in, but let me introduce these ladies or have them introduce themselves to our viewers. I will start with Dr. Innes. If you could please tell us about the work that you do.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. Good morning to all. A very critical issue for us. We tend to think, okay, if you see a snow cone cup, for example, on the road, that it's unsightly. But there are just so many other aspects of that particular issue that we see. And as the principal coordination officer of UNEP's Cartagena Convention Secretariat, I have the honor and challenge to actually try to bring some regional coherence to this issue of land-based sources of marine pollution. And the countries that border the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico and are in the Western Atlantic, those are the secretariats, contracting parties from the US in the north to Venezuela in the south, through northern South America, all of Central America, Mexico, and then every single island that you see in or around the Caribbean Sea. So that is our intergovernmental platform for cooperation on waste management that might reach or have an impact on the marine environment. So I think that that's enough of an introduction. I would hand over to one of the others, because I'm sure that we're going to have the opportunity. I have a tendency to jump right in and begin talking, so it's better for me to stop quickly. This is a matter that is very, very dear to my heart, because I think that there is a lot that can be done and should be done in the region. And we are actually keeping ourselves back from really moving forward where we can be, both developmentally as well as socially, in this regard. Thank you.
Yeah. I do love your positivity, though, in terms of there's so much that we can do. You're not saying if we don't stop tomorrow, then, So I do like your positivity. Thank you for that. Shanta, let's talk about the work that you're doing.
Yes, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to join your forum this week. As you would have mentioned, I am the project director of the Replast OECS project. And this is a project being spearheaded by Unite Caribbean Limited in St. Lucia. Unite Caribbean as a firm is a Caribbean consulting firm specializing in Caribbean development and regional cooperation projects. We are basically working on, I would say, this trailblazing project, because it's really something that perhaps we've spoken about recycling, over the years in all of our countries. Yeah. But for us now in St. Lucia, there have been a number of small initiatives, but I think through the Replast project, we're trying to concretize initiatives over the years and really come up with a system that can be sustainable. The project is essentially looking at creating a sustainable circular economic model for managing and recycling plastic waste in the Caribbean. The main aspects of the project is to set up a collection system on island, and secondly, to actually export this plastic that is collected to a recycling plant in the region. So essentially, we've had a number of initiatives in the past, people trying to collect plastics and other recyclables, but it has not been a concrete activity. So we're hoping under this project, we can basically develop this pilot. It's a pilot that we are doing, and we are hoping that we can replicate this pilot in other islands in the OECS and the wider Caribbean.
Beautiful, beautiful. Sean, last but not least, tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Okay, so if I were to, good morning, well, good afternoon for those of you who might be listening who are in Trinidad, because it's after lunch here, right? And thank you so much for inviting me. If I were to put what I do in one sentence, I would say that we transform the way you think and act towards waste. So I am the entrepreneur between Dr. Innes and Shanta. So I have decided, after spending many of my work life in the corporate sector, I worked in waste for, this year was my 15-year anniversary. Wow. I decided to take on the adventure of social entrepreneurship, and I started SILE Environmental Services Limited. So at SILE, we operate in 3 main areas. One is school-based waste education. because I do a number of presentations. And this also presents an opportunity for me to stay in touch with Dr. Innes and Shanta as well, because we have a lot of similarities.
Yes.
And so we do school-based waste education. I am now the author of a children's storybook.
Congratulations.
Yay. The seed was, I just read a post of one of my very good friends. He said, the day you planted the seed is not the day you reap the fruit. So this seed was planted 14 years ago when I wrote my first book.
Wow.
And it is now materializing. That book didn't really get to see the light of day, but that's okay. Nothing for time. So
Exactly.
I now have this opportunity because I've always wanted to leave something tangible behind after I've, done the lectures, given the stories, played the games. I am also a mother of 3. And my daughter, who is 7, has a really fantastic relationship with waste and how she feels about recycling, and she can't stand when people litter. So I really wanted to capture that. And that's what I have done in the book. We also do a number of online and offline training programs. So I teach people how to start composting at home.
Okay.
And I've actually started a short course program with the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine, Trinidad. It's the first waste short course. I'm very, very proud of that. So we continue to do a number of training programs, very foundational. So even if you you always had this desire and you wanted to get a little experience, but you don't want to get too technical, it's like the perfect course.
Yeah.
And then I also work with companies to help them become what I say waste efficient. Just like there's efficiency, waste efficiency, in terms of how they manage their waste as a resource. So those 3 areas.
Okay, beautiful. I think we have some very, I don't even know the words for the ladies that we have on this panel today. Very resourceful, everybody, in their own space. So kudos to you all for the work that you do. All right, so let's jump right in. Thanks to our viewers for being here. Please remember, if you have any questions, you can drop it in the Q&A. We are actually going to have a few polls. Do we want to run any now? Oh, sorry about that. We actually have a video that Shanta contributed to us, so we're going to play that right now.
As a fisherman, I work hard to provide for my customers and my family. Being able to feed them makes me happy. When I am out at sea, I see plastic waste floating in our waters, which can endanger our marine life. Our oceans are becoming polluted and our fishes are being harmed. The ocean has no place for plastics. So for our sake and the sake of our marine life, place your plastic waste in a recycle bin. Let us treat our environment right. Be a hero today. Reuse and recycle plastics. This message is brought to you by Replast OECS, implemented by Unite Caribbean and its partners.
All right, Shanta, thank you for that video. I do believe it brought across, for me personally, I saw a lot in that video, in the sense that it's connected with the finances, providing for your home, what we are actually seeing on our seas. So thank you for that. What has been the response to that video?
Well, essentially, a lot of people connect, especially to being able to provide for your family and the fish. Recently, we had training for volunteers for our collection points, and persons were quite concerned that the fish that they are eating might be contaminated with microplastics, etc. Also, one of the key things for us is looking at the littering issue, whether it be plastic litter that ends up in the marine environment or just generally in rivers and other waterways. because we know we have a major issue with flooding, which can be a result of indiscriminate dumping of plastic bottles or any other waste for that matter. So it's something whereby, persons have really been cognizant of the fact that we are doing something to even harm our own selves, really.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Lorna, I want to start with you in terms of the scope of our waste management problem. Is the Caribbean unique in how we manage our waste?
No, it's not. I wish that I could say that, everyone else is a great example for us. But the truth is that in many parts of the developing world, there are quite significant challenges with, first, the production of waste, and then, of course, the management, disposal, even collection, and the end of life of that waste. And of course, our region, we're part of that developing world. There's a cost to dealing with all levels of the waste management issue. And of course, if you're a developing country, that suggests that you have less money to address the problem to start with. So I want to bring that right up front. And of course, if you're a small island developing state, you have even less money, because no matter what we do, our islands are not going to get any bigger. I'm sure that all of you are going to agree on that. There is nothing we can do about our small size. But small size is very much linked to the size of our economies and societies. And as a result, it limits our capacity to be able to address many of the issues, not just in waste management, but of course, this is what we're talking about today. But we have a tendency, I think, in the region to criticize politicians, to change our governments, because we expected that they would do something that they didn't do. Perhaps in a sense, forgetting that this is not the European Union. As much as CARICOM may look like the European Union, when I'm in meetings in the European Union and I hear the amounts of money that are thrown around, I know that that is a completely different space. And therefore, what I'm looking for from areas like the European Union are best practices that we may be able to scale down at an affordable cost for the region. So I want to make that point right up front. Now, in terms of what are we generating? We are not unique, and the majority of our waste stream to the marine environment, which of course is my business. We saw it, we heard in the introduction that it's mostly land-based. That's very much true. That doesn't mean that they are not marine generated waste. You have ship generated waste, which includes many of the things that we see from very small fishing boats. So when we say ship, in this case, it's loosely. It's a loose comment, in the sense that fishermen have a tendency to take dry goods on the water, canned food, crackers in plastic bags that they just break open. So you have crackers and a can of sardines, for example, or a can of corned beef. And we see a lot of that waste back on our beaches, that then our tourism sector is selling overseas, marketing overseas for tourism purposes. So what we see then is in a sense, an unresolved conflict between two blue economy sectors, both of which are extremely important for our region, but that conflict must be addressed so that one does not adversely affect the other. And I don't think that is very difficult to do. capacity building, awareness raising, etc.
Yeah.
Now, so we're talking plastic, but there are other areas of waste as well. And I want to raise that point right up front. Plastic is a significant percentage of the waste that we see in the marine environment, but we are also dealing with the ones that are less visible. Nutrients from agriculture that come down in streams as wastewater. You're talking fertilizers. Fertilizers create bacterial colonies that then find their way into the marine environment. Fertilizer does the same thing in the marine environment that it does on land. It causes plants to grow. But algae in the marine environment is not something we want to bloom on top of our pristine coral reefs, for example. So that is one of the other issues. There has been a statistic that says approximately 80% of the sewage in the Caribbean region goes into the marine environment as raw sewage.
Wow, that's a high number.
That's a high number. It's scary, but if you think about the fact that a small country like Barbados that has been trying to address this issue because they are so very focused on protecting their beaches and their marine environment, and you think about the fact that they have been trying to establish a West Coast sewage treatment plant for the almost 30 years I have been an oceanographer.
Wow.
Where is a country that is 14 miles by 22 going to get a $500 million to put such an extensive sewage treatment plant in place? So there are some issues there, and we can come back to that. And then the final piece, of course, is wastewater management, gray water, storm water, and all of the things that rainwater will grab and take on its way to the coast. We will come back and talk about these different waste streams, and of course they can be further subdivided into branches. Because we are now dealing with COVID-19, for example, and doing this Caribbean Week, Environment Week online, we can think about 2 streams of waste that will probably dramatically increase that we might not even get to today. Technology waste, the fact that there are more laptops, more tablets, more phones, because children need to be in school, etc. Where are we dumping the batteries with lithium in them, etc.? When our
e-waste is another huge problem. Yes, I agree.
Absolutely. But then the other one is medical waste.
Yeah.
You've got people are using more wet wipes to wipe their hands. People are using masks, disposable masks, PPEs. All of this is a huge amount of waste.
But then there's also the concern around the chemicals that we're using to clean our hands as well. That's going to end up in the water. And then, where is that going to go? Is that going to wash out into the ocean, into the sea? So that's another concern.
Absolutely. And the last piece I was going to talk about, just mention, is the dissolved chemicals. And that is a whole heap of different substances, some of which may be actually beneficial. I mean, I wouldn't say all of them are really, really terrible, but some of them can have a very, very high cost for our marine assets out there. Thank you. Okay.
I am actually going to bring up a poll now. I'm going to ask the moderator to bring up our poll. We are going to be asking, asking our guests, do you think we have a pollution problem? It's going to pop up on your screen. If you could please give us your thoughts. Let us know what you're thinking. Do you actually believe that we have a pollution problem? Not just plastic, but overall pollution problem within the region. We'll leave this up for a few seconds so we can see what's happening there. But while we do that, Sean, I'm going to ask you, do you think that you have a pollution problem in Trinidad? Is there a pollution problem in Trinidad?
I would say the short answer is yes. And ladies, I am keeping my mic a little muted because I do have small people, and you might hear a scream from time to time. I am at home. But
Let me
I
just
would-
give you the poll response before
Mhm.
you get to your answer. So 100% of our audience believe that we do have a pollution problem. So within that context, Sean, let's jump into
that
what you're
does
saying.
not, so therefore that does not exclude Trinidad and Tobago.
There you go.
I say that littering begins in the mind. It starts in the mind before the action happens. Somebody makes a decision to do it, and then the action follows. So with that, we still have people throwing things out their car windows. We had a scenario where a guy literally drove his pickup and offloaded bags of garbage into a nearby drain. We still have that going on.
Yeah.
We've had a major flooding incident that happened last year, I believe. A number of people, lost everything. And during that, you saw people still dumping their garbage because it's, well, if you can't see me, then I can do it.
Yeah.
And the laws are centered around that. You have to be caught red-handed in order for you to feel the brunt of the law, because we do have fines and so on. From my perspective, our Litter Act is very old. It's archaic. It was developed in the 1940s, revised in the 50s. However, it does not take into consideration the mammoth size of waste that we are now generating, because consumption has increased, I don't know how many times fold. So because of that, I would continue to say yes, but what that links to for me is a mindset issue, is a behavior change problem that also needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Sean. And the point that you made about or purchasing patterns, that is a hot topic for me, because I believe not just in terms of the products themselves, but mentally, when we decide that we need this product today, knowing that we have, this is product 2.0, but we have product 1.0 already. Do we actually need some of these items? So I believe our purchasing patterns, as well as just capitalism on a whole, it's something that we do need to address, and we do need to examine within ourselves. Do we need all of these new products and these new gadgets that come up? Because with the new gadgets, then you have to look at where is the waste going to go, and it kind of leads me to think about our islands ready for some of the products that are being created and developed in first world countries, where they have the setup and they have the disposal sites or even the landfills, because I believe most of our islands actually don't have landfills per se. We might have disposal sites or dumps. But that takes away from all of what we're talking about right now. So I do want to jump into Shanta. Tell me a little bit about the categories of waste that you see. Is plastic the largest issue, which is why Replast formed, or are you seeing other types of waste material?
Thank you very much. In general, you will find, in terms of waste characterization, you have organics form a very large part of the waste stream.
Yeah.
However, because plastics are lighter, you have a lot of plastics from, as packaging, etc. The plastics would be seen much easier, right?
Yeah. Because they float on the top as well.
That's right. So plastics rarely become the issue, because it's an aesthetic issue, and it's also an issue of volume in many cases. Going back to a question that was posed earlier about the uniqueness of the region, we have to remember that we are finite size. A lot of our islands are very small islands. And landfilling is probably one of the most basic forms of disposal, but there is so much landfilling that we could do. when we look at our consumption patterns over the years, I mean, I could think of in a previous life when I worked with the water company, where most persons drank the municipal water supply, probably had their own bottles, etc. And we got to a stage where everybody wanted to drink bottled water. And then this bottled water comes in plastic bottles. Then we have a lot of beverages that are being imported, etc. So our consumption patterns have changed, and with it comes the issue of having to adequately dispose of these beverage containers. It's something that we have to look at, and for us, it's really the effectiveness of recycling or any kind of intervention is really based on how effective we are with respect to public education and changing the thinking of people. For us with the RePlas project, one of our project components is really public education and public awareness.
Yeah, very important.
And our strategy really is to look at collection at 3 different levels. One, the community level, where we're setting up collection points in select communities. Secondly, we are hoping to set up collection points within the school system.
Mm-hmm.
And thirdly, we are looking at the private sector entities, and we're working with a few hotels. So we're trying to target various groups so that we can initiate really a behavioral change, and really to get everybody mobilized and involved. And I think it is one, when we look at the response that we are getting on the ground and the interest of people, I mean, people are actually pushing us. When are you starting the collection? When is this happening? I have so much plastic that I want to bring in, and so on. Our project is really one where we are introducing a non-monetary incentive scheme. So
I was just going to ask you if you're incentivizing persons.
Right. So persons bring in the plastic is weighed, and then points will be issued according to the weight of the plastic.
Okay.
One of the things I should mention is that the project is a public-private initiative. So it's not just a project that is being implemented in the public sector. We are working with the private sector, and the private sector actually have come on board very, very well to be business partners. So when you get your points from bringing in your plastic, you can actually redeem those points at various merchants on island.
Okay.
So this is the intention. But in so much as we have an incentive scheme as part of this entire project, but persons rarely are motivated otherwise. I think people are a bit tired of seeing rivers overflowing with plastic when it rains. They go to the beaches. Now there's so many beach cleanup campaigns, etc. So I would say the initial response that we are getting really stems from people's desire just to do something or to be part of something that they can contribute to, as opposed to there being an incentive. I think the incentive, what we are seeing, the incentive is secondary to the whole issue.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. I love that. And I love the fact that persons don't necessarily want to get incentivized by it, by doing the right thing. And that's pretty much what it is. You know, if you can take your waste and turn it into something else, I believe let's go ahead and do it. It's not going to cost you anything. I do want to backtrack a little to talk about the waste management issues that we have and the result of it, or the result of the improper waste management. Sean, let's delve into that a bit more, because I want us to connect the dots really, so persons can understand when it is that you throw this one bottle, you know, in a population for Jamaica, in a population close to 3 million people, if one person throws a bottle on the ground, you know, every day, then that's almost 3 million bottles. And this is assuming you're only drinking one bottle, you know. So put into context, what happens when our waste is not properly managed as it relates to how is that going to impact me? How is it going to impact our country? What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts on, I have many thoughts. So let me let me see if I could pick them out one at a time. I like when you raise the point with the number of bottles, because people always say, but it's just one, right? We have a population almost 1.5. Even if we minus the babies, right? Because they're not going to be drinking from the plastic water bottles, we'll still have over 1 million, right?
Yeah.
So, there's this saying, it's just one bottle said 1 million people, right? And we've realized, and I tell people, the plastic bottles don't have arms and legs. So they're not walking to the drains. They're not walking, to the sides of the road. They are getting there because of our actions and our behaviors. Yeah. So for us in Trinidad, we do have what the iCare program. The iCare is an acronym: Community Action Recycling. I forget the E. Oh gosh, I always forget. But anyhow, we have such a program where beverage containers are collected from the households, and a number of bins are placed around the country. So similar to what Shanta was just talking about. And now every school in Trinidad and Tobago has an iCare bin, right? So for us, we actually do have a material recovery facility. So those bottles are collected, processed. So the covers are removed, the labels are removed, the bottles themselves are shredded, and the majority of which is shipped out of Trinidad and Tobago. I think one of the countries is Honduras, to be turned into something else. And then some of our local beverage manufacturers do use the flakes as resin to make new bottles as well. But that is in the minority. Yeah. And we also have Carib Glass Works, which is the only 100% recycler of glass bottles in Trinidad and Tobago. So they take your old glass and turn it into new bottles, but they've always been complaining that they still don't get enough glass. Yeah. Right. And for us, I love when Shanta said and one of the attendees commented as well. Sometimes we always look to the financial incentive to be the first avenue, but if we sit and think creatively, it does not necessarily need to be the first thing that we do. We are still hoping, and I tell people I'm not going to hold my breath because I may die, that the beverage container deposit bill is yet to be passed. It's 20 years in the making. We had a lot, and I'll be very honest and say we had a lot of static from the manufacturers. They didn't like it, and it had to go back to be revised, and so on and so on and so on. So there was always a back and forth between the government, between the manufacturers, who is going to be responsible, so it has not yet been passed. They said this year, but this year is almost to an end. Yeah. So we're still waiting.
But 2020 has been a different kind of year.
Yes. As I say, anti-corona had other plans. So we take that into consideration. But at the end of the day as well, we do have, because we still have a lot of those practices that I was talking about earlier, we still have some shifts that need to happen. So the beverage containers, the Tetra Paks are baled. We do have, I think we have a subsidiary of Tetra Pak, the company, in Trinidad and Tobago as well. And the cans are sold because we do have a scrap metal market where the cans are sold as well. So for us, we do have some of those options, and I encourage people to use the options that we have available rather than focus on what we don't have or what we're still not getting right. Do the things that you can do, where you can, how you can do it. Because oftentimes we tend to find excuses. I mean, I like talking to people to find out why they're not engaging in activities. I'm brave that way. And one of the things that comes up is I don't have the time. So I say, okay, well, I put my bags in the trunk of my car when I'm leaving the house and find the bin nearest to me. You don't have, I'm not asking you to do it every day, but don't, think of that as a hurdle, though there are other hurdles that need to be addressed infrastructurally, legislatively, because recycling in Trinidad and Tobago is voluntary. It's not mandatory, not law that you must collect recyclables. So we do have some ways to go, but I am happy that there are some things that we do have available to us, and I'm glad to hear about what's happening in the region as well. so that we can start utilizing some of those things. And there's no need to reinvent the wheel. You know, this is why conversations like these are important. And Dr. Innes was talking about, you know, how our responsibilities is a umbrella to kind of put everything together and see how could we as a region, you know, all benefit and all take care of our waste as well. So
yeah, Lorna, I want to ask you in terms of, you know, the connecting the dots. I believe that's very important for our guests, our viewers. You know, let us say to them, what are some of the repercussions of improper waste management? I mean, let's do like a top 5. Just 5, Lorna.
I hope you're not holding me to environmental consequences, because I in my top 5, I immediately put livelihoods, which of course is a socio.
People like money. People like money. So bring it to their food, their table. This is what happens when you don't manage your waste properly.
That's right. It's a socio-economic issue first and foremost. That is based on the consequential degradation of the environment. Because Caribbean people's lives and livelihoods are heavily dependent on the Caribbean Sea.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I talk about blue economy, and the ordinary person might not consider themselves to be a part of that. But if they're the breadwinner in your house is a fisherman, you're part of the blue economy.
Yeah. Or even let's say you're a pescatarian. I mean, that's another point, but
absolutely. If we have been talking about the fact that the World Economic Forum in 2016 estimated that by 2050, that the ocean will have more plastic than fish.
Yeah.
If nothing is done. Now, there's been a great movement since then, and we would hope that can turn around, but it's, you know, to turn it around is so slow. Okay, so that's one. Lives and livelihoods will be affected. Plastic concentration in fish. Mm-hmm. We have been looking at the issue of microplastics. What happens to plastic when it hits the marine environment? It gets banged on by rocks, by coral reef. You know, it gets turned up and turned around, and it's broken up smaller and smaller and smaller until the pieces become not visible to the naked eye.
Yeah.
That's what we call microplastics. And what happens is that the fish are coming along, you know, and they're going ahead and they're taking in their water, trying to get nutrients, and they're taking in these bits of microplastics. So what is actually happening is, in a sense, we are asking countries to look at circularity in terms of your policy development for waste. In other words, whatever you use, first reduce the amount you use, and then whatever it comes all the way to the end of life, find a way to use it again in some way, shape, or form. That's called the circular economy. But what we actually have with the concentration of these microplastics in fish is that we who produce the plastic, use the plastic, dispose of the plastic, we are now taking back in the plastic where we eat fish.
Yeah.
So there's a different kind of circularity there that is really not desirable at all. So that I would say that's one of the top 5 consequences. Now, there was an excellent documentary this week here in Jamaica on TVJ on mangroves, and I highly encourage you to have a look at that, because one of the first things they talk about in the documentary is the fact that the volume of garbage that chokes the mangrove swamps.
Yeah.
Now, these mangroves are nursery habitat for juvenile fish. We know this. It is these juvenile fish that are protected by the mangrove roots and the swamp. And then when they're old enough to fight their predators offshore, then they swim out to sea and then the fishermen can catch them once they've reproduced, etc. We are seeing a drastic reduction in the coverage of mangrove swamps regionally because they're being choked by plastic. Now, let's talk about the flooding issue. So you're asking me about 5 top things, but these are
but there's so many.
and they're also connected. See,
yes,
because I don't know if you recall the 2000. Well, you may be too young to recall the 2005.
Hopefully,
2004, 2005 Asian tsunami, and one of the very highly publicized stats from that tsunami was that in areas where there were pristine mangrove swamps, there were fewer people and proper infrastructure behind the mangrove swamps that were affected by the tsunami than in the areas where the mangrove swamps had been decimated for coastal infrastructure development. So it is a flooding. These mangroves take an abundance of flood waters and dissipate the energy associated with those flood waters coming in from the marine environment before they get to our houses and our hotels, etc. So this is a kind of secondary impact when we decide that our mangrove swamps are just swampy land that taking up space and creating mosquitoes, and we need to get rid of them and use the land profitably. I think that most of our politicians have gotten past that, but we still have a lot more work to do. And so I would stop there. I know that there, again, I can keep going because the top 5, it's hard to pick out 5. But I think that we have enough to be discussing, and I'm seeing some really interesting comments in the chat as well.
Yes, I actually want to bring one of the questions to our panel now. So Joshua asks, we hear that a small amount of plastic waste is actually recycled. Is recycling enough to adequately tackle the plastic waste problem? That's a heavy question. Lorna, you're shaking your head straight off the bat.
Nope.
Sean, too.
No.
Then what other strategies can we put in place? Let me ask Sean. Sean, what other strategies do you believe we can put in place to tackle, our plastic problem?
So these strategies are not just for plastics, right? Now, one of the things I learned very, very early on in my studies with waste is the hierarchy, right? And that dictates to us how waste should be effectively managed. Now, we typically know them as the 3 R's, which is reduce, reuse, recycle. But there are more R's in between there. I say 7 R's in all, because what I have found, Shelley and ladies, is that we tend to use recycling as the plaster for every sore, and it is not. There are different strategies that we should be adopting even before we get there. And I wish I had the picture to show you because it's like a cone, right? Before we even get to recycling, because recycling is not the be all and end all solution. And I know after I say this, Dr. Ines will add her piece as well, and Shanta too. So the R's that I have really been sharing like wildfire. The first one is refusing. If you don't need it, don't take it. Because we have this thing as Caribbean people that we don't want it, but we take in the 4 straws and we have 1 mouth. We don't need it. It's a bit true, or even extra. I think it's a social thing for us. We like to be seen drinking through straws. I don't know. My father told me that the other day. He's like, Sean, straws are a social thing, And my dad is in the 70s, right? So if he can understand that we don't need it, don't take it, people. The next
extra
one
napkins,
is
extra cutlery.
Extra everything. We don't need the extra, right? Especially if you're buying food, and I'll get to some of those other things. The other one is reduction, right? So after we've refused, if that doesn't work, we have to really make less waste, because sustainable waste management talks about making less waste, period. And that is what Dr. Ines is talking about, the circular economy, because waste is normally a linear cycle. Take raw material, make it into a new product, and then at the end of its life, it becomes waste. But we have to break up that linear cycle and make it circular. So what is input for one or what is output for one becomes input for another. Then there's reuse, right? My mother always told me when she was little, we make an Indian delicacy called anchar, and it was served on a banana leaf. And she's like, Shan, we don't know if the banana leaf was washed. We're licking the leaf because it was so good. Right?
It's natural, it's from nature.
It's natural. And after they finish, they take it and they put it in the compost. Right? So we have to start, encouraging the principles of reuse. Then there's repairing. We have this thing when things broke, we want a new one. Shanta spoke about that already. Fix it. If it's broke, fix it. Because sometimes it's a little part, just a little thing, a little, sensor, something that goes wrong. I can't tell you how many times I fix my fan, right? Until the electrician says, Shan, if it break again, I can't fix it again. That was the last fix, right? I encourage some of my entrepreneurial friends who do products to have a refill strategy. Let people return the items to you, their glass bottles, the whatever it's in, and refill and give them, some kind of a little discount or something. They could determine what they want it to be, right? So that you are now releasing less waste into the environment. Then there's repurposing, where the entire upcycling industry fits into. We take waste and turn it into something that is of higher value. And then we reach the recycling. So you see how many R's there before we even get to that word. That's why I said we need to stop using recycling as, the be-all solution, the plaster for every sore, because it is not. Then after we've done all of that, then we have recovery, right? Which is where we have waste energy plants and anaerobic digesters and all other larger, different types of technology coming in. And then it gets to the landfill. So many things we have to do before we even get to the word recycling, that we need to start paying more attention to, asking ourselves different questions. What else can I do? What else can this become? Can I turn it into something else?
Shanta, I'd love to hear from you. I mean, you're focused on a recycling initiative, but at the same time, with your public education, I'm sure you're looking at, letting people know the alternatives. Please unmute.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a very exciting conversation. I must say that we have had like a mixture of reactions from the public. For us, again, it's a pilot project that we are promoting, and we are initially dealing with beverage containers, right? So we are now getting into the realm of people saying, so what do I do about my plastic container with the bleach and the fabric softener and all of those? We have the issue of the plastic bags where, for example, here at Massey Supermarket, you actually pay for the plastic bag if you want one. You are free to bring in your own bag or to buy a reusable bag. So it's very interesting to see that people are conscious of plastics in general, because everybody is saying to us, so when are you going to be taking these other plastics, So it's quite interesting that I find the education level as it relates to plastic waste is very, very advanced in terms of the public.
I agree. And I'd just like to say, in terms of, knowledge and public education, the different types of plastics, a lot of people aren't actually, aware that there's so many types. When you look at your phone case, they don't necessarily think of it as plastic. When you look at, maybe tables and chairs that are around you, there's plastic almost everywhere.
That's right.
In every product. So it's really for us. And I believe we're starting with the low-hanging fruits, which obviously will be your beverage bottles.
Yes.
We consume so much of that. Locally, we do about 800 million beverage bottles alone.
Yes.
So, this doesn't include your bleach, detergent, and even motor vehicle lubricants. That also comes in plastic packaging. So those are some of the things in terms of public education that we need to think about. So I love the fact that, when people speak with you, they ask you, what's next? What about this other type of plastic? So
that's
very, very good work.
One other thing, just to support Sean's point earlier, we are actually working with 2 recycling plants in Honduras. When our project started, the intention was for us to export our plastic beverage containers to Martinique. There was a recycling plant operating there at the time, which has since closed down because there really isn't enough plastic being generated to sustain it. So this is one of the challenges that we have faced in the region, where no one island probably can sustain an effectively operating recycling plant.
That's very,
right?
I've heard that as well.
So hence the reason for us, we want to promote collection systems in the various islands and to look at a solution where the islands can come together, either send it to a particular location where there'd be an existing recycling plant, or look at the option of perhaps a recycling plant in our region being able to deal with the waste streams from the various islands.
I love that you brought that up, Chantal. Just to touch on that in terms of, the feedstock and having maybe one recycling plant in the region, but there's so many things to consider when you think about that as well, in terms of what are the policies, what legislation, the hazardous waste, because this type of material is considered waste, and not all islands or not all countries are willing to bring other people waste, because that's something that they need to consider as well. Because I know through my work experience that the different islands, let's go back to China, sorry, in terms of they stopped importing waste because the material was not up to standard or up to par. So when we are exporting, that's something that we need to consider. You have to clean the items, etc. So Lorna, I see you wanting to say something.
No, I mean, I hope I'll get an opportunity to talk about some of the integration of that's going on at the regional level. But I wanted to pick up on that point about what we import and what I would call producer responsibility. Now, we know that what they call EPR, extended producer responsibility, but we don't have that many producers in the region. But the question is, are we producing the quality of product? And according to Shanta, we're not, and yourself, we're not. In some cases, the quality, when it's recycled, nobody wants it because they wanted a higher standard. So this really helps us to begin closing the loop here, because we're now talking about what our companies produce and what our governments import. How do we decide? What policy do we put in place to make sure that there is a high quality of product? As little as possible is used, yes, with all that as Sean has told us, as little as possible is used, and then when we're done with it, it is still of a high enough quality that we are able to repurpose it back for something else. This is where we have to get to.
Where should the government come into play with that, Lorna, in terms of, should we require our manufacturers to now start using raw materials with recycled content? Because if it is that we're working on recycling, we say we're recycling, then where is it going? All right, so it's going across the world, and then they turn that into pellets, or they turn it into whatever it is, so that we can now import that.
Right.
Where is our government in terms of ensuring that once these items are shipped overseas, then we're bringing back not just fresh raw material or virgin raw material, we are recycling and using products with recycled content?
Okay, let me take a couple of minutes to introduce you to the high-level forum of regional ministers on waste management. And the 4th meeting was held just the 3rd and 4th of November this year. And what we have in play since 2018 is a draft Caribbean Waste Management Regional Action Plan to define both regional as well as island-specific waste management strategies and systems that are environmentally as well as financially sustainable, but most importantly, supported by private sector and civil society. And the specific objectives of that solid waste management plan are to define strategies and initiatives to facilitate, first and foremost, what we've been talking about all the time, communication, public awareness, on understanding of the individual's responsibility as well as the companies, the private sector's responsibility, but also the government's. Strategic planning, looking at the entire suite of waste. And okay, I have a whole set of waste going towards my landfill. How can I eliminate, can I reduce that by 50% so that only 50% of the entire island's waste stream goes to that landfill? And the other 50% I am able to circulate somehow with all the R's that Sean has talked about. I get 50% out. At that point, can I get it down to 25%? Because there is the opportunity then at the regional level, maybe through a waste transfer station. So each country has a waste transfer station, and all of them then agree to fund a regional warehouse. Let's just call it a massive warehouse where all of this is going to be repurposed, recycled on behalf of the region. So expanding that waste management infrastructure, I think, is very much an objective of this regional action plan. Managing debris and litter related to disasters. We are in the Caribbean. We have just seen, I don't know how many tropical cyclones come through here, and we are not done. I'm now hearing about one called Iota. And we are seeing it here in Jamaica. The waters are streaming down the hills, the mountains, and it's bringing all kinds of stuff with it. How do we manage that before it gets to the marine environment? And how do we now, if we used less, according to Sean, and I agree with her totally, we would have less. So how do we manage disaster debris though? Because we are gonna still have more than we normally would have. Preventing waste pollution from the very beginning by using less. Increasing landfill diversion and recycling, I talked about that. And then we foster public-private sector partnerships. This collaboration between our ministers responsible for waste in the region, I think, is one of the most critical forums and areas of collaboration for what we're talking about, and to deliver the national policies. Because once they agree on the regional action plan, then this is a plan that we, for example, as regional and international organizations, can take to a donor, and the national governments can take it to a donor and say, I am ready to do my part. Can you partner with me by supporting with funding and with technical expertise as well in order to deliver this? So I wanted to bring that in, and the role of government in shaping policies and strategies and frameworks, not just at each national level. We are too small for that. We cannot manage this on our own, but at this kind of regional scale, that will actually allow us then to work together. One of the things that I would tell you, remember that waste moves. In the marine environment, there is something called currents and waves that carry waste. Yeah. So the waste that is generated here in Jamaica is not necessarily going to stay in Jamaica. It might end up on the shores of Cayman Islands, or it might end up on the shores of Colombia or Cuba. Yeah. This is a regional issue, and we need to see it that way, which is why, I mean, just to bring in something that is in a sense related, but slightly off topic, the issue of sargassum. Some of the sargassum that we are seeing on our shores actually started on the shores of West Africa. So you need to see we need to look at the Atlantic basin as the ecosystem for addressing waste management. We're going to start on this side of the Atlantic, but eventually we're going to have to look across the pond and see what is coming from over there that was not generated on our side either.
Yeah.
You see? So these are some things just for consideration. Thank you.
Wow, that was a lot, Lauren. I feel like I should put my leg up and stretch out a tad just now. But I'm going to have another poll question. What do you think has led to our garbage pollution problem? I do want to hear from some of our viewers. What do you think has led to our garbage pollution problem? We have a very active chat going on there, and I have quite a few questions that came to me. So while our viewers respond to the questions and pick the three that apply, I'm going to jump into another question that we have here. Let me see. All right, I believe Abigail, we kind of touched on this. Are you aware of any companies in the Caribbean that supply 100% recycled plastic resin? And do you know of any companies that utilize 100% recycled plastic resin to make food grade plastic containers? I actually am not familiar with any entities, especially within the Caribbean. I do know that I believe Coca-Cola has a plant-based bottle. That would be the Dasani bottle. And I know that there are a few entities looking at, again, using post-consumer recycled content in making their bottles or their packaging. So do you ladies know of any entities within the region that's actually using, I mean, she asked for 100% recycled content, but I don't know if we're there yet.
No, I don't know any that uses 100% at all.
Certainly not in the region. I did mention that we were collaborating with 2 recycling plants in Honduras. One of them is called Terra Polyester, and as the name suggests, they actually recycle plastic material that eventually becomes polyester products. So you would have mops, mop buckets, fabric, etc. And there's a second one in Vima. The end result of their process is to manufacture PET preforms. So we would be sending to them the PET beverage containers, and these would be recycled and new preforms would be generated for, the beverage manufacturing eventually.
Okay. All right. So we have the response of our poll on screen. What do you think has led to our garbage pollution problem? And number 1, behavior. Our behavior as individuals. Then we have policy and legislation. I do want to touch a little bit more on that. Followed by that, we have lack of collection. Chantal, collection in your region, is that an issue in your island?
Yes, for sure. Again, when we look at our islands, we have islands of different topographies. So, for example, St. Lucia, volcanic, very mountainous, etc. Barbados, on the other hand, relatively flat, etc. So even from the point of view of putting in collection systems, we have challenges here in St. Lucia where the collection companies or contractors are not able to go to all the communities or all the areas to collect waste. And in the past, before there was, I would say, the broader coverage that we have now, we had situations where persons would dump their waste in the nearest river or the nearest space.
Goes back to behavior, huh?
Yeah, so there was a lot of indiscriminate dumping. And I think this is where we have this issue of finding this waste and those bottles in rivers after heavy rainfall, because then, when the water comes, it then moves the material in the river, especially if you're talking about a major rainfall event. So having adequate collection systems is important, but also having people to start segregating their waste, having maybe their own composting on an individual household level, because we have to really get people to start minimizing what eventually gets into the landfill. As I mentioned earlier, our islands are not expanding in terms of size, and we probably don't have the space. We are so close to each other, you know. At the north of St. Lucia, we can see Martinique. In the south, we can see St. Vincent. So we can't exactly reclaim land and create more landfills, because we would then be in somebody else's backyard. Yeah. So we need to look at that in terms of us not wanting to make our islands that we are marketing for tourism landfills. So we cannot really look at the fact that, you know, when the waste is being disposed of, this landfill is just going to grow exponentially. So we have to start looking at reusing, reducing, all the R's that Sean spoke about. And where we do have to dispose of it, recycle.
Yeah. I do want to touch on something with this influx of information around environmental awareness, as well as, you know, the plastic bans that we've seen, or the bans that we've seen across the region. You know, Jamaica implemented their first ban in 2019. We've had other islands speak about it from 2018. It has been a conversation for quite some time now. However, have these bans been effective? That's one. And then I'll drop to a part two, where with the influx of various eco-friendly packaging, you know, are we able to manage that type of waste now? Because some of these eco-friendly packages aren't necessarily made from natural material. You know, some are still plastic based. So first question, have the plastic bans been effective based on what you've seen? Sean, I'll ask you to take that one. Have you, well, where is Trinidad in a plastic ban? You know, what is happening?
I'm not gonna tell you, Shelly, don't ask me
that. Oh gosh.
But we have
no.
Oh gosh, because that is
how you leaning in, so you're ready.
That is really oh gosh, it's a sore point for me, you know, and I'm trying to stay calm. Right, Shelly? I'm trying to stay calm over here. Woosa. Right. Woosa. We have had, I think even before our general election this year, that we were going to place a ban on the importation of styrofoam. Right? But here is the kicker for us, right? We manufacture 60% of the styrofoam that we use locally. We only import 40%. So even if we were to ban the import, we still make more than we're bringing in.
It will be phased. It will be phased, which is similar to what we did locally.
Yeah, because they said that they want to give the manufacturers some time to retool, re-engineer their machinery and so on to be able to handle the alternatives. But I tell you, I'm not holding my breath on anything. Because I might end up, you know, ending up in Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex on a bed in a morgue. So I'm not going to do that. So for us, we have said that we're going to do bans. They have not yet been in place. So I don't know. I actually really wanted to hear from you guys the answer to that question, because I'm also very cautious of bans. They have to be done in such a way that we are not transferring the learned behavior to something else in another way. You know, so I have a love-hate kind of relationship with bans. I just think that they have to be done in the right way, so that at the end of the day, whatever the objective of the ban is achieved. But I do have, you want me to answer the second part too, or you want to?
Sure, go ahead, because I see Lorna itching over there. Lorna wants to say something.
She like me, itching. Right, but the other thing is that I always say we have to be careful that our solutions don't become problems. Plastics, when they were initially created, was seen as the solution to the problem of that time, which may have been rampant deforestation and so on. So we transitioned, but we didn't have the forethought to realize, oh, plastics last 450 years. May not necessarily be such a good idea. But at that time, it made sense. Yes. So even with the switching now of eco-friendly, and we have some greenwashing going on. I'm being very open with the attendees and with you ladies, because people don't understand what some of the terminologies mean. What is biodegradable? What is oxo-degradable? What is compostable? What is degradable? People don't understand that. And since some of the manufacturers are just slapping labels on saying biodegradable, customers now fall into the trap and say, well, they said it's biodegradable, so I can use it. And then it's also a money issue, right? The alternatives are more expensive than their plastic cousins. So you have people now asking, who is going to bear that cost? Am I the business going to bear that cost? Or am I going to pass that cost on to the consumer? So we have all of these unanswered questions, but a lot of those items, especially ones that are labeled compostable, must be dealt with or must be handled in an industrial composting facility, which we don't have. So then they are, we have a saying, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So it's better than its styrofoam counterpart on one hand, but it's not being handled in the way it's designed to be handled. So all of that now, we have to really start paying attention, because we've had a huge influx of eco-friendly food containers in Trinidad. And I don't know if you guys have had it in St. Lucia and Barbados and Jamaica as well, but it was huge, so now we have a case where that is still just all going to end up in the landfill, and to me that defeats the whole purpose on why it was created. It wasn't meant to sit in a landfill. It was meant to become compost, and then that compost now be shared to the farmers and so on, so that we can grow healthy and nutritious food. So
ladies, this is such a huge topic. Sorry to cut you on. We have about 10 minutes, and I want Lorna to take 45 seconds of that, because I have 2 more questions to come, Lorna. I'm timing you. Come, Lorna.
I was actually hoping to hear from Shanta before you came to me.
Well, I'll jump back to Shanta shortly.
Just say,
I use up 10 seconds.
I have no idea what to do with 45 seconds. So let me just say that right now. If you don't come back to me, it's fine. 45 seconds just doesn't work. No, just quickly. Training for customs officers and border patrol agents is a part of the mix of integration of policies and strategies across the region. It has to be, because they need to understand what those labels mean, but the private sector as well. So we come back to public education and awareness, but also sector education, training of the private sector. Do they understand what we want?
Dropping something here, Lorna, and you can kind of touch on it as well in terms of businesses and manufacturers. There was a question from Khadija. What are the concessions? Are there any concessions or incentives for businesses to be more environmentally friendly in terms of their packaging? So you can kind of probably touch on that as well.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. And I think that there's some incentives already. And we have a plethora of projects that are right on the cusp of getting going, including our own. We are partnering with the government of Germany to work in 5 small island developing states. We're going to try not to overlap with Shanta and others, but to see how we can look at all of these different bits and pieces and support them in the reduction, starting at the manufacturing and importation and going all the way through. In terms of the plastic bag ban, have they been effective? Some countries more than others. Definitely, we've seen a variation in terms of, so for example, in Grenada, and I'm ashamed to say this because I really would have liked that. Grenada, all of these countries you're talking about are my contracting parties and they're dear to my heart. But Grenada's national policy is plastic bags banned that have handles. For God's sake, you know what's going to happen? Every supermarket has plastic bags.
Yeah.
Disposable plastic bags that don't have handles. Nobody is having a problem with the policy. It's just that it hasn't gone anywhere in terms of the reduction of plastic bag, of disposable bags nationally. Then
so it's the same bags, just without the handles.
Yes, exactly. It is.
Oh, okay.
It is. And you know, we are now in significant discussions and communications with Grenada, trying to get them to go to the other level. The other thing that worries me is that, you know, even heads of government that I've spoken to the Prime Minister here in Jamaica, for example, and they are very anxious to move towards sustainable blue economy. But they don't seem to realize that some of these things go along with it. You can't leave waste management behind, integrated waste management behind, and say you're doing sustainable blue economy. It just doesn't work. Sean mentioned greenwashing. I'll talk about blue washing all the time, because you will call something sustainable blue economy, but if you're not dealing with all of these different issues, your border control, how educated your customs office agents are, how strong your policies and legislation is that controls what your manufacturers do. All of that must be a part of the mix. Yeah. Sorry, not 45 seconds.
Sorry, not sorry.
All right. Well, we're going to have to time you next time. And next time we're going to cut your mic. No, joking. All right, we have 2 more questions. And I actually have a viewer question that I'm going to jump to somewhere in between. But how do we get persons to change their behaviors? You know, we can talk about connecting the dots. We can talk about what they shouldn't do. But what's the real grassroots that we need to get to for persons to understand? And Shanta, I'm ready for you. What do we need to do?
Thanks. Well, education, public awareness, but it has to be very targeted. So, for example, you know, we underestimate the youth and the children, etc., and how they can actually catalyze behavioral change in their households. What we are trying to do with the school programs that we are trying to get off the ground, now with the COVID situation, we have a lot of virtual learning happening. So we've kind of changed our strategy. We're developing virtual learning tools, videos, etc. And we're trying to basically educate these kids and asking them to be champions of recycling in their households.
Yeah, so I think when you give them that role and that title, it gives them this little kick to say, I can tell mommy what to do.
That's right. And let them be responsible. Let them be responsible for the recycling or the collection or the separation of those bottles in their homes. So that's one. Also, we think that there's a need to use your local personalities as champions, because persons look up to different people, cricket players, your Calypsonians, etc. One of the jingles, actually, Shelly-Ann, that you have, our project song, we have 2 of them, one in Creole and one in English. They were sung by 2 of our Calypsonians, popular Calypsonians. And when people hear them, they recognize those Calypsonians. So when they connect to a personality, for example, our composer, Ronald Buhingson, you know, when they connect to those persons with the environment, they listen, they pay attention, and they really listen to the message, because it's important that you don't just put the message out there, but it's a message that is received and people can put it into action. So
all right, I am actually going
innovative with respect to those.
Yes, I completely agree. We have about 4 minutes left, and we have 2 polls that I'd like to touch on, and one last question for you. But we're going to do the poll, guys, again, chip in. Whose responsibility is proper waste management? You know, we spoke about extended producer responsibility. We spoke about the fact that we have behaviors that we need to change. So there's so much, as well as the government, you know, whose responsibility is it? And based on what we have here, the choices are individuals or consumers, then you have manufacturers, then you have government, and then putting it all together, you have everyone. So let us know what your thoughts are. Whose responsibility is proper waste management? Ladies, while our viewers are doing that, I would love your final, maybe 3 points, Lorna. No pressure, Lorna.
Not me
What
first,
strategies?
dear.
What's that?
I said not me first.
Yes, you
Because
first. You first.
Oh gosh.
What strategies would you like to see implemented? Lorna.
Okay.
All right, I think I'm gonna end with Lorna.
Okay. Thank you, darling.
Shanta, you go first.
Essentially, what is important is education. We want to highlight that, because even with our project, you know, you could implement, put systems in place, etc. If you don't educate people and let them know why they have to do what you want them to do, then there'll be no collection, there'll be no recycling, because people have to connect to the reason for it. So we have to instigate behavioral change. For us, recycling, we want to push it as a new movement. This is the right thing to do. In your poll just shortly, I want to add another category. The other category is really business places. Everybody now is looking at corporate social responsibility. So we have to make recycling or waste management everybody's business, not just everybody on the individual level, but also at the company level, because we've been engaging companies and a lot of people are seeing how it actually helps them to appear more environmentally friendly, to be more sensitive to their staff. And a lot of companies want to get into recycling at their own company level. So,
all right, I'm gonna have to cut you there, Chantal.
Yes,
sorry
sure.
about that. Actually, if you could bring up our final poll, and Sean, if you could give your insight. We have about 30 seconds to go. No pressure.
Lorna and I are in the same boat. Anyhow, what I would do is I would stick to entrepreneurship, because Shanta already said some of the things that I was going to say. One of the other things that we can do moving forward from an entrepreneurial perspective is we need to continue to be problem solvers and innovators. There are a lot of challenges, but there's also a number of opportunities. We need to continue to ask ourselves, how can we be a part of the solution? And don't be afraid, because when I started, I was very, very scared. Scared of the big boy companies, scared of anybody who thought that, you know, people told me I was being ridiculous and what I was doing would never work. So we have to look past that, believe in ourselves, believe in our passions, but be able to come up with the ideas, because that's what entrepreneurship is, to solve the problems and to be innovative. If you want to invent, that's great, because we need that too. But is there how can we make things better? Because there's a quote that I live by. It's not always about doing things better, but sometimes we simply need to do better things.
Beautiful, beautiful. Our response from the third poll that we had, everyone pretty much agreed. Everyone has a responsibility and a part to play in managing our waste. As it relates to this current poll, where does our trash end up? 76% of our audience said in the ocean or in the sea. Lorna, you can take it away.
I want to take it away from the plastics, because I don't want us to leave here with the thought that plastics is our only problem. I sent a video to the moderator, a link to a video that we created called Caribbean Breaking Up with Plastics. It's like a relationship and how you can break up. Of course, my metal water bottle is always next to me. I drink a gallon of water a day, and that is what I use. Nothing else.
That boy, I'm fighting for 2 liters, Lorna. You had to teach me.
No. I drink a gallon every day. This is 16 ounces, so that's 8 of these. All right.
Wow.
But the point is, it's individual responsibility. So it comes back to education. If you know somebody who has not generated any kind of waste today, introduce them to me, please. When we put on lotion has plastic microbeads in it. Scrubs, facial scrubs. This is just the tip of the iceberg for this discussion today. And I just want to point out, particularly to our audience, that everybody has a responsibility to begin reducing what you put in the environment. And then you have a citizen responsibility to push your government to do the same thing. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, ladies. I think you got in under like 45 seconds. I'm gonna look back at the video and time it and send you a prize. But thank you, ladies, for joining us. Our audience has been going at it in the chat. I saw the notifications coming up. I'm sorry I wasn't able to address every single question that we had. But at the same time, what we will do is we'll reach out to you after the fact, as we should have most persons' emails, and try to respond to your questions there. So thank you, ladies, for joining us, and thanks to our viewers. I do hope that everyone walks away today realizing that we all have an impact. We all have a responsibility to play as well in terms of how we generate our waste, the products that we choose. You know, something as simple as the type of product. You know, do you need to use the plastic produce bags that are in the supermarket? Do you need to use, you know, the product that comes with a styrofoam tray? Some of the fruits is packaged in a lot of plastic as well. Do we need to do that? So these are choices, and these are things that you need to consider as individuals, and collectively, we have a responsibility. So thank you, ladies. I would love to thank our sponsors before we leave. Once again, thanks to Scotiabank, Coca-Cola, Junk, Cayman, and Cayman Business Solutions. Please remember, we have our final wrap-up at 1 p.m. today. We will be joined by the Honorable Minister Pernell Charles Jr., MP, and we will be wrapping up Caribbean Environment Week. Thank you, ladies. Thanks to our viewers. Have a good day.